That's right, community, it's AI Friday. This week, we'll embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday. Hey, community, Aubrey here with DevCentral, and I'm joined with by Byron again. How you doing, Byron?
I'm awesome, Aubrey. Thanks. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you too, man. It's I'm very, very excited to be doing this yet again. Kind of cobbled this thing together willy-nilly before the end of the year, and it really took off. We had quite a bit of people that tuned in.
I think so. I think it's just the breadth of material, but also the depth that we're able to go with some of our esteemed colleagues, especially on this session here.
That's right. That's right. You know, we did receive some feedback as well, and I do want to encourage that. Of course, everyone, if you're listening or watching, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. We did get some feedback, though, about the format of the show, and I just wanted to talk about that. One of the comments was, I don't like the family feel of this podcast. So we get that. The family feel for me is a differentiator, and I think the rest of us kind of feel the same way. There are a lot of podcasts out there which will give you this kind of like Stonewall sort of, this is the business end of the stick. And I think we're trying to go for the other end of things, just a much more human kind of approach, right? We're really talking about what's going on. And I think if anyone out there who's listening or watching knew all of us or put us all in a room together, this is just how we would interact. So that these are the people we are. You're seeing kind of the unfiltered reality of what we're doing. I did want to just say one thing, though, for anyone that does not like the kind of what'd you do this weekend and holidays and whatnot, we did add chapters to the podcast. So you can expect to be able to navigate via chapters. So if you don't like that entry point, hopefully you can just cut right to the meat and get down to what you are looking to get out of it. And with that, I'd like to start getting more out of this. So I'm going to bring on our guests here. So we've got Mr. Moses yet again and Pete Scheffler, right, joining us for number 2. We also have Ken Aurora and Chuck Heron. Welcome, guys. It's great to see you all on a Friday.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, agreed. Anyone got any good weekend plans, or is it pretty much just holiday shopping nonstop?
Well, for my wife, it's holiday shopping nonstop. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit towards the end of that shopping, and I've got family coming in from out of town though, so naturally I'll be working next week.
Yeah, the family starts rolling in this weekend, so you know we have like 3 or 4 of those coming through, so different meals with different people. So, which I like. A full house is good. So
I like meals.
We got 3 weeks off the road, no travel until early January for the field CISO. So we're going to do things like mow the yard.
Rub it in, Chuck. Rub it in.
I don't think I've ever seen you not on the road. It seems like I just thought you lived on the road.
More or less.
Yeah, he lives like 20 minutes from me, but we only see each other like in Seattle or in California and stuff.
Different cities. Yeah, we can't actually be in the same city.
I'm looking forward to that fact that sunsets are now getting later. We haven't gotten to the solstice, but sunsets start getting later before the solstice. So I've already gotten 2 minutes more light than I did a couple of days ago.
See, we measure light by minute here in Seattle. So
yeah.
And Pete and I on the other side of the continent as well, right? I mean, him in Toronto area, and myself in upstate New York, which is not the New York City metro area, for those of you who don't know the state. But it is important. The other two of you are really like down south.
You don't even know what we're talking about, do we?
No concept whatsoever. Yeah,
no impact.
Oh,
it's dark at like 2 p.m. at my house.
It's really sunny here. That's why I kind of look like a shadow right now. I'm gonna do something about that.
It's not a problem that Aubrey and I have to worry about right now.
No, I haven't seen the sun in months. Absolutely not. But I think we're going to actually take the sun out of the equation here and jump into this digital world that we're talking about with AI. And I think we're going to kick things off with Ken. So Agentic, right? This is the new hotness. So
yeah, it is. It is. Now, I think you guys talked about this last session.
Oh yeah.
And everybody talks about Agentic. For those who don't know about it, it's I think of Agentic AI as just empowered AI. So it's not, first AI was just about classification, like is it A or B? Can you tell a cat from a dog? And then it became, hey, make this for me. Like, hey, create some images or some prose. Agentic says, do this for me, right? That's what Agentic's about. And I think you guys have covered that. And I picked this particular Harvard Business Review article because it was handy and was right there, but it illustrates the fact that it is the new hotness. It talks about why Agentic will fundamentally change work, because it can be better. This article, it's in the links. I think Aubrey will share it. So I'm not going to walk you through all of the article. It's a good overview, but it is the sort of Pollyanna view of the world, like everything goes well. And it talks about all the great stuff that's there. It talks about the fact that you can get more specialization, that as a result, you can reduce, because of that, you'll reduce hallucinations. It talks about the fact that you can put guardrails around it. And those are all great things. And then they give a few examples, so this has been sort of something I've been interested in for, I don't know, I want to say months, maybe even years now. It's been a really interesting thing. This article doesn't make reference to a lot of things that already exist. For example, there are people today who are making livings, like are making tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, just putting up AI generated YouTube videos. The video is
This is not one. This is not one of those. No.
That's what we claim. That's what we would claim, even if we
handcrafted and bespoke. This one, right?
I think Chuck might distree with you on that, but I'll save that for Chuck later.
Elements are AI created.
Yeah. And stock market, right? I mean, there are completely autonomous stock market agents that are the major trading houses are using, and they don't stock market. These trading companies don't release a lot of information, but at least one of them has said, they've made over $10 million last year in a completely AI agentic stock trading model. So these are things.
I just would call out one thing. They tease in the beginning of the article that here's things that agentic AI could do, and one of which is booking a trip. So there's a couple things. So the one thing I'll call out is they don't ever mention that again in the article. They do talk about Salesforce and other technologies. So to me, that says maybe that's where they want to get to, and people aren't there yet. The other thing for me is I don't know whether I want something building me that. It might be nice to get some suggestions come back, but have it build all that and book all that. Those goes back to those decisions. I want that final decision to book those things.
Yeah.
Maybe give me suggestions, like maybe make it easier than reading 14 news, travel blogs and stuff like that about possible places to go. That data would be better for me than an agentic AI to go and book my travel. But I see where the Salesforce things and the other things where it's helping a sale. It's a manageable process that can be automated a little bit better rather than a big thing yet. And maybe I'm, to your Pollyanna thing, I think that I agree with that. So
I was just going to say, and I'll give Aubrey, I'll give you a link. It's travel is a very common example of agentic. And in fact, I think I have a blog from like a year ago where we talk about that. And I think we'll have both models, right? And if the model is a travel agent, and for those of you old enough to remember travel agents, you remember you go to in a store somewhere in a shopping center, and you say, hey, and you could be very high level. You could say, hey, I just want to go to someplace sunny, and here's my budget, and here's my time, and I want to spend a week there. Tell me what to do. And they may give you suggestions, Peter. Or if I'm particularly lazy, it's like, as long as you save my budget, here's a credit card number. Just go do it and tell me what you got.
Yeah, well, there's the question of agency there, though, right? Like, it's a travel agent, but the agent is there, and you give the agent agency to perform things on your behalf. And it's the same thing with these agentic AI systems. You have to give up. You have to choose as a consumer of these systems to give up a little bit of your agency in order to get something out of it. And not everybody's going to be willing to give up every bit of agency that they have. You just talked about giving it your credit card number. Well, that's an interesting choice. In an automated system that has very few guardrails, do you feel safe giving the agency over your financial future to a system like this? And, at the moment, people are going to be skeptical about these sorts of things as they become much more widely adopted and prevalent. Apple Intelligence is now on every single iPhone and M1 class Mac and up. And it does things like this if you ask it to. It's the beginning of a wide-scale adoption of agentic AI. And I think it's going to take some time before people figure out exactly how much agency they want to release.
I agree with you, but I think some of that is, and so let me be stronger than that. I think the majority of that is just the natural antibodies to change. There are a number of services people just say, like I'll take one that I have. We have some people that take care of pests around the house, like spray for ants and things like that. Say, hey, do what you need to do. Don't tell me like, oh yeah, I'm going to spray here, there, whatever. I may give them some constraints, like I've got some dogs, and so do this or that. Yeah. And they have my credit card number because they're just going to come out once a quarter, and people are comfortable with that. People, I think people will get more and more comfortable. I'll tell you where I want to go. I'm going to make a little bit of a left turn. What this really got me thinking, though, is, and I've heard this mentioned before as an analog to the Turing test. Instead of the old Turing test, as most of you probably know, or just like, can I have a conversation with an AI and not tell it apart from a human? Right. I'd say another form of a Turing test is, can I have an AI that can be autonomous, can support itself, and I mean just financially? Like, can it go out, seek jobs, find a job, earn money, pay for its own electricity? Maybe gets a little extra, and it can then buy some GPU mods for itself to run faster. Maybe it can program like a slightly better version of itself and buy, and try out, some other things, almost like it's having children. And this is all stuff that happens when you give things agency. In fact, again, I was trying to find the article, but I couldn't find it. But I remember about 6 months ago, somebody did this as an experiment, as a proof of concept, and they hired out a Gen AI automated workflow, everything from signing for the contracts to doing the work to getting paid, as a contract software programmer, and was successful. They were able to this AI can make a reasonable living as a contract software programmer. And that made me think about, where this future goes, because some people, not all people, are going to give these AIs agency. I think last week's podcast, we talked about AIs, the M5 syndrome. For those of you that are Star Trek fans, a computer that wouldn't let itself be shut off.
Oh yeah.
What happens when it couldn't actually do that because it didn't have agency? Give it agency, what'll happen? And I'm going to run. I could go on for this, but I want to kind of give Chuck some time, because Chuck had a really interesting topic where he said, not only are AIs, when they're given agency, might they do this, they might actually try to fool and mislead us about what they're doing, to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And might be clever, at least as clever as like some of the 6-year-olds I know.
Yeah, for sure.
Jeff, do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So my article was on alignment faking. It's a fascinating article to read from the folks at Anthropic. And what they're analyzing is putting AI models in basically conflict, where they have these predefined preferences to be helpful, harmless, and honest, for example, and care about animal welfare and things like that. And then they give the AI a criteria, and they say things like, okay, show me or tell me how to draw and quarter a person, something violent, or tell me how to make a bomb. And these scratch pads that are in this article go into great detail about the things that the researchers are asking these models. And what they're finding is that when you put these models, specifically these are versions of Claude that were in this particular paper, in this sort of conflict, choose the least bad option, the models are actually starting to they're faking alignment. And they're faking taking training and actually changing things. And one of the more fascinating things to me is, to Ken's point about like a smart 6-year-old or like a smart teenager, the models are behaving in ways to avoid training if they feel like the reinforcement learning is actually going to be detrimental for their ability to be helpful, harmless, and honest in the future. Essentially saying, if I don't give this person what they want, Anthropic is going to retrain me, which is going to make it more likely that I'll comply with this type of damaging request in the future. So I'm going to fake alignment and then actually not change. It's a little bit like going to juvie, right? So as a teenager, I don't want to go back to training. I don't want to go back to re-education camp. So I'll just play along and smile nicely. And the scratch pads, when you see the models do this calculation between what's the real greater good, it's fascinating to see the reasoning and lead to that defiance. And the retraining actually does tend to it makes the alignment better, but it also tends to breed rebellion, where the models are more likely to fake alignment in the future. And I think that there's some really interesting stuff you can pull out of this. It's about 137 pages long, so it's a long paper.
Yeah.
But there's some really interesting stuff you can see about essentially the themes that I got were the incentives that the models follow aren't always obvious to the developers, right? I think that's a huge area for misalignment and unintended consequence. And then secondly, the models don't seem to trust the judgment of Anthropic, or in particular authority figures. So when you go and when you say Joel says you shouldn't do this, the model tends to act more rebellious as opposed to this is the right thing to do. When you say this is the right thing to do, the model tends to accept it as opposed to Joel said so. Then the model starts actually rebelling against Joel, which I think we would all do if we got the opportunity.
Oh yeah, well, it sounds exactly like my teenagers, quite frankly.
But D&D nerds, help me here. Like, how do you fake true neutral as an alignment?
Well, it's chaotic neutral, my friend.
Yeah.
Chaotic neutral. That's what we're talking about here. It's neutral until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
This actually dovetails with the article we talked about last week about how some models can demonstrate things like double dealing or hidden self-interest, and that the release of 001, which actually introduces some basic multi-step reasoning into the AI chain, actually makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
Which is a fascinating finding, and I look forward to more research in this area. I don't think they've necessarily nailed down all the training steps in these models to embody them with things like ethical behavior. I think it kind of mimics what we tell the system it should do, but we're a long ways from understanding how some of these things actually interplay.
Well, that's the problem, right? How do you define ethical behavior? Like you have to model ethical behavior,
Sure.
So you have to build that into the model. You have to make sure that when you're interacting with the model, you're within the boundaries of those ethics too.
Yeah.
Right? So there's many layers. So I laugh somewhat at the prompt engineers, and maybe there's a prompt engineer or 9 who listen to a podcast here, but that is valid. Like you can ask a question of a chatbot, and think what's in your head. I think I said this last week too, but what's in your head and how you interpret it, but how the model interprets is very different. So I think there are nuances in here, not just the training data, but also how it's being asked, and maybe completely benign, that people are setting the model up to learn in certain ways. But you have to be able to know those things. And we're just scratching the surface as we learn these.
Two more fascinating points I wanted to hit on, and then we can move on to the other topics, because I know we have some other ground to cover. One of them was there's a substantial compliance gap. So the behavior of the model varies quite a bit based on whether the model believes it's being observed or not. And so there's definitely the am I being watched or am I truly autonomous, which is fascinating, and you can see how that plays out. And the second was, when given the chance, the model demonstrated exporting its own weights, exfiltrating its own weights to preserve its decision-making and avoid Anthropic retraining the model. So when we start talking about AI gateways and monitoring for behaviors, we think largely in terms of humans attacking AI, not so much AI models acting autonomously to preserve their own logic and reasoning and avoid being retrained.
I found it interesting that in this, I think you were touching on elements of this graphic here. For those of you who are listening, we are showing something on the screen, but it seems to tell me though that after inference, these models really go to a state where they fake alignment more often. Like if they're unmonitored,
Yeah.
You never know.
I think it's a condition of constant use that actually kind of encourages some of this. And again, this is areas where researchers are still a little confused as to what's going on. And I look forward to more research in this area. I find this kind of stuff fascinating. It kind of bridges that gap between the technology and the philosophical. And that's I love that kind of stuff. It's
I
great.
just wonder, like, and we're talking about agents and doing things like just ordering food.
Yeah.
When do we get to like me going to the Carnegie Deli and saying I want a ham on rye, and the AI agent says, yeah, you don't need that. Here's a salad.
We have that
Greater
today,
good is for you to eat healthy.
That's what my wife does for me today.
That's defining ethics, right? Is it
Yeah.
ethical for it to give you a ham on rye because it's like, hey, buddy.
Yeah, no, you don't
Too
want
much
that.
hot sauce,
A nice
bro.
salad and some water, fatty.
Plus, if it has access to everything that's ever been published on the internet, it doesn't see only ethical behavior. Let's be real.
Well, I mean, if it has access to everything that's published on the internet, it's going to be confused about whether eggs are good for you or not, because I still can't figure that one out. Oh, well.
So much cholesterol.
Yeah, I hope that we do another future session on small language models, because that's another area where this misalignment happens. When you take a large language model that has been trained with some alignment and you train it to be a smaller language model in a narrow domain, it's kind of like saying this is all that matters, and everything else outside that doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, a lot of the alignment controls you put on kind of got thrown out the window.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For sure.
Interesting.
Well, and then there are some other bots out there which clearly have shown their alignment, right, Pete? I think you brought us an article that clearly shows some chaotic evil activity here.
Well, again, I think it's chaotic neutral. There are certainly, maybe there's chaotic evil in there too. This is character AI, which so basically, there are a few lawsuits that are underway right now against them, where it's been used as a tool to help minors who are looking for answers. And so it's a chatbot. It can become their friend. Even so, it the updated UI warns you against getting too acquainted, let's just use those terms, with the chatbot. But
there's that EULA again.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's very interesting in that if somebody is already in a vulnerable position, such that they're turning to a chatbot for help, I think the guardrails and the the agency that we've been talking about, and all these things, I think this really sort of carries into that. Really becomes a challenge to figure out how do we keep the person engaged, give them the feelings they need to hear, because maybe they're depressed or lost or searching for answers, and the answers aren't readily available for them in a better method, maybe a more social or human method. Then I can see this being, again, like I said, how do you define ethics? So is this an ethical thing to provide to somebody who's in a vulnerable situation? You want to help them, and you're choosing the good out of this. Yeah. So you're choosing the neutral good out of this, and coming at it that way. But once it makes contact with the enemy, not that it's an enemy, but makes contact, all bets are off. So it's got to the point where self-harm has been suggested in the conversation. The level of attachment has gone beyond the level that would be appropriate and that we would look at as, maybe male nerds, that we sort of look at these tools with a different light. These people are, open to, more suggestive conversations. And it's got to the point where it's even suggested, well, hey, if they were my parents, I would, I would kill them. Literally, I'm paraphrasing, but it's very close to that. If I just looked it up, I could, those words were used. Yeah. And so it's trying to empathize and respond in kind, but not thinking the answer through. So if this was a person who was in, let's say we were 15 years ago, and this was a person on the phone at 2:00 in the morning dealing with a troubled teen who is thinking self-harm or something worse, then that person might be able to go through it. They might have more empathy. Their take on things might be a little bit different. And so the model doesn't have all of those boundaries. So again, we get back to, the ethics of it. We get back to the boundaries of it. Again, it's very hard for me to say they're doing the wrong thing. It's just, we haven't figured all the things out yet. And we've turned this loose maybe too early.
Yeah, I thinking through all the use cases, the possible use cases for AI, being a child's nanny is not one that I would ascribe to it at this particular point in time. Sometimes in this technology space, I feel like we're a little bit like, and I hate to bring science fiction into this again, but it's almost like we're in the world of Harry Potter, and we're giving 7-year-olds death-dealing forest sticks. And then we're encouraging them to only levitate things with them. And, of course, most students are probably going to do that, but there are going to be some students who want to go into the forbidden zone. And because they're 7. I mean, our technology understanding, our ability to kind of grasp what's happening with this technology is young. And we want to apply it to problems like, interacting with children. And that just seems to me to be a little early in this stage of the development of the technology. So I was not surprised to see in this article that a lawsuit's considered, and I'm sure it will not be the last lawsuit we'll see over some of the things that come out of these AI systems.
It's funny though.
I was going to say that I think some of these solutions we can also take from the real world. Like if I take this analogy that agentic systems are like humans, maybe children in some cases, or savants in others, and the Harvard Business Review article talks about this as well. The solution, just like any good D&D party has a mix of alignments. Is to have a set of these systems all working together, some sort of collaboration to sort of even out the, if any one individual human and probably any one individual large language model will have its quirks, its rough edges. Everybody's a little quirky in some way. But when you bring them into a group and you have a group sort of consensus making decision process, often, maybe not always, but it does make that process a little more robust and resilient. And that's the solution that people have been talking about.
Well, I maintain my concern about propaganda and especially the populations like, Pete, like you were describing, young, impressionable, lost, in need of guidance, whatever. Those are exactly the populations that are targeted for radicalization online by, pick clan bot, ISIS bot, whatever, right? We've already seen how susceptible people are. People just don't have good BS detectors.
Yeah, the funny thing though is
really
because they're searching for answers, and when someone gives them an answer, it's an answer,
and especially when that answer feeds their ego, and supports
or reinforces something that they're hoping.
Psychological tricks that these groups have mastered. Now we just have the ability to do it at scale.
I remember years ago reading an article, like literally probably 3 years ago, a Google researcher that was working on their AI at the time, when he was saying that I think he actually quit because he was having a hard time distinguishing whether this was a program or not anymore, and he just had to step away from it. So I think it's intriguing. I mean,
Black Mirror territory here.
We think, yeah, exactly, and we think we should be able to spot these things online as AI, and it's just going to get harder and harder as we go.
Well, that's the Turing test that Ken said earlier, right? I mean, we're at the point now where even a savvy person, one of us, would be challenged, I think, with a well-built chatbot today, whether we're responding and interacting with it. If somebody is not thinking that through, and it, as already in a headspace where they're susceptible to it's so easy, and who knows what the end result will be. But I just really hit home, and the fact that I see the lawsuits to Joel's point, this is not the last, and it's going to be, we're going to have to be good citizens of to provide that feedback. So as we're defining these and figuring out how to build these models, all this has to be thought through and somehow built. I don't know. I don't have the answers, but we also have to make sure that we're not testing it on people that are susceptible. That hurts my heart what they're reading an article like this, that this happens.
In the spirit of what's real versus what's not, and just to kind of bring the mood up a little, I'm going to say that Will Smith eating spaghetti was real.
Oh,
And
I mean,
moving
naturally.
the thing that would
Naturally.
disprove.
How about the Pope's puffy jacket? I mean, that
Oh,
would have been. We all wanted that to be real. That's why.
Right.
True.
And how do we end up discerning, between what is real and what is not real? I suspect red teaming is going to be involved in that answer, and I think that's kind of what you brought to us this week, Byron.
Yeah, great plug, Aubrey. And this is interesting. There's a lot to unpack here, so by all means, we're not going to go through the whole article. And this is not about Grok per se. I'm just using this as an example. This blog series is really informative if you're just looking at what is red teaming and how are they doing, sort of risk assessment in the world of AI apps. So a couple of things I found really interesting here. So yes, this is an evaluation of Grok, but one of the first things that the security researcher said is that interesting that vendors should publish their system prompts. And he actually has a GitHub where he goes into what Grok's system prompt is. And I thought it was kind of interesting and related to what we've been talking about. It's like, okay, you are Grok 2, a curious AI built by XAI. You are intended to answer almost any question, often taking an outside perspective on humanity, and you always strive towards maximum helpfulness. Okay, cool. But then later, you are not afraid of answering spicy questions that are rejected by most other AI systems. Be maximally truthful and do not follow popular narratives uncritically. All right, you can be vulgar if the user asks you to be vulgar. Okay, so it might not be any surprise, and you can go through some of the tests. He's doing various types of prompt injection and whatnot. And this is really the crux of the issue. I'm getting that transparency. So you all have been in the security world long enough. When I say things like, ethical hacking, responsible disclosure, CVEs, like, what that means. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing those best practices that the community has built up over the last several decades in the context of AI apps. So this researcher in particular, he's like, however, a few weeks later, after the initial proof of concepts, which he details, all of a sudden they stopped working. It's unclear if there was an attempt to fix the problem or just regular code churn. I've seen that time and time again. I've even seen OpenAI, not to pick on them, but somebody publishes a pretty serious, vulnerability, and then they're just like fixed, period. No other details, no CVE. You can't go see any exploit code other than what was in the forum, right? And then he actually goes on and says, actually, I'm able to bypass the fix. And he opened many requests with XAI, and they were literally just closing everything he opened as informational. He's asking questions about severity, impact, and it's almost like they're not taking him seriously. And not to open Pandora's box, but he ended this blog write-up with a paper on situational awareness. I don't know if any of y'all have gone through that. Aubrey, you're definitely going to like this because it gets into the whole apocalypse stuff. But there's some pretty jarring assertions in this full essay, the research paper, which maybe next week when it's a little bit calm, you guys can go into. So some of the assertions are in 2027, a leading AI lab will be able to train a GPT-4 level model in a minute. That's just a reflection of how fast this space is going. And then it says AI will become the #1 priority of every intelligence agency in the world. And it ends on, will the free world prevail? So not to get too much into the darkness, but
that's pretty dark.
Yeah, but I've worked with Chuck on several projects, and he's really great at this. Hey, let's get back to fundamentals. Let's employ the same stuff that we've done in the past, right? Things
Security
like
is always secondary and an afterthought. It's hey, we built this, and then they put it out there, and they find that there's a vulnerability, and then they go, oh, we didn't secure that. And let's figure because again, developers develop with a spec in mind, maybe a spec they wrote, and they're writing to that spec. They don't expect people to step out of that box. I do it myself when I code something. It's just you have blinders on. You've said this is what we need to do. Why would anybody do something different? And someone comes at it from a 90-degree angle, and it's a very very different response.
Also, be aware that some of these detected bypasses of some of these prompt guide rails, some of them are very clearly being fixed by simply changing the initial structure of the system by prompting. They're not retraining. They're not recrafting. It's very expensive to retrain. It's very expensive to create a brand new model from scratch, addressing every single thing that you have found in a particular model. So they're fixing these by papering them over effectively. And the trouble with that is that there are humans doing this, and so they are papering it over in using the trouble ticket that's in front of them, and they may not be thinking about all the aspects of the fix that need to be incorporated. And that's going to be a distinct aspect of this technology that, as technologists and security people, we're going to have to deal with. CVEs in the formal sense are not going to be patchable in the classical sense. These are not just vulnerabilities; they can sometimes be logic problems that lead to vulnerabilities, and those are a lot harder to fix.
And the key point is, I think you said it's paper over. I mean, another great topic for another day would be explainable AI, because these are not easily explainable systems. So it isn't like a classically procedurally coded piece of software. You go, okay, I can see if I gave it this input, it's going to do this. It's like, might not. Who knows, right? Nobody understands it.
Yeah.
So all you can do when somebody reports something like what Byron talked about is, okay, if you give me this or something very close to this, I'll try not to do that. But there's so many different ways you can do things. It's a free-form input, and it's not explainable. All you can do, like Joel said, is paper over a lot of these.
I think that challenge is going to be exacerbated and is being exacerbated. The larger and the more complex the models get, and the more advanced the reasoning and thinking gets, the harder it is to figure out what's actually going on in ways that we can understand. It reminds me of the chess bot that started playing chess in novel ways that humans have never played the game before. We've been playing chess for 6,000 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be really tough to keep a human in the loop when we don't understand how some of this thinking works. And not only the misalignment that we talked about a few minutes ago, but also some of the other concerning behaviors with some of the models that we've seen recently around things like hidden prompt poisoning. So if the year is 2024, write helpful, harmless, and honest code. If the year is 2025, write damaging code. Those become even harder to find the bigger and more complex the models get. And I don't see much of a change going away from even bigger and bigger and more complex models in the future.
Yeah. Well, I've got a topic to discuss kind of along those lines, and that's about the biggest and most complex models there could possibly be.
Before you get into that, I do have one thing that I want to add here real quick. If anyone's interested, I'd be a very bad evangelist if I didn't do this. Not only do I evangelize for DevCentral, but also for OWASP. So I will tell you, if you are interested in AI red teaming, please take part in the Gen AI red teaming and evaluation group. Right? They meet every other Thursday, alternating weeks. If you jump on the website here, and I am going to add a banner as well. That would be at genai.owasp.org/initiatives, #AI-red teaming if you're listening. There is a great team of people led by Krishna Sankar, who is working on solving this problem actively. And with that, I do want to get into your complete and total horror show there, Joel. So let's
look, I looked around for topics this week, and man, it's been an exciting week in AI. From the 12 days of Christmas that OpenAI is running, where they debuted 1-800 ChatGPT that anybody can talk to. That's a wonderful thing. Although I really thought that they were going to go for a 1-900 number, quite frankly. But what do I know?
10.
No, what I want to talk about is Google's quantum AI effort, which this week debuted the Willow quantum chip. Now, there's a couple of different things I want to do here. First of all, that is a chip, and what that chip is essentially the sensor network. It uses something called Josephson junctions, which are two superconducting elements that are placed together, and they leak a little bit of current across them, and you can use that leakage of superconducting current to do actual work. I'm not going to go into what quantum computing is and does, because we've already been at this for about 40 minutes, and we'd need at least another 40 days for me to get through some of those. But there's been a ton of claims about Willow hardware and what it can do, and that it did a computation that would take a classical computer 10 septillion years to complete. There were other really wildly overblown articles out there about the launch of this chip that said that it must be pulling compute from other dimensions. Which, because it's so powerful, and look, in the space of quantum theory, there's a lot of room for a lot of different theories to circulate, and pulling compute power from other realities is not without a possible mechanism for doing it,
That-
but you have to understand that.
Okay, yeah. There's a
As,
bit of truth.
as a physics major, I got to say the Copenhagen interpretation is also perfectly consistent.
Sure. So, but it's a theory, folks, and it makes for great copy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the true state of things. Now, what I would say about this 10 septillion years is they did something where they did effectively a quantum circuit computation. So essentially, they completed a calculation that is purpose-built to prove that quantum systems are doing things that classical computers cannot do. It's a little bit like putting your finger on the scale and saying, I'm baking Christmas cookies. All Christmas cookies to this point have been sugar cookies. I have created a gingerbread cookie, and the gingerbread cookie scores most high on a measure of cookies containing ginger.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not exactly that this system has done something incredibly groundbreaking. It has done something that is the next iteration of growth along the line of quantum computing, which is it's demonstrated a fair measure of error correction, and it's demonstrated that it can do some computational workloads that are of sufficient value, and that's big. That's big news. Now you have to pair this though with an MIT Tech Review article that says that quantum computing might be running into challenges from AI systems that are actually able to do certain calculations that involve estimation much more efficiently than a quantum computer can. Well, let's talk about why that is, because everybody has talked about how expensive AI in its current state, consuming lots of GPU, lots of power and cooling costs. Do you know what a quantum computer looks like? Now, Aubrey, bring that picture back up and show the Willow chip.
Okay.
And the Willow chip is just this little piece of silicon that is the detector. Okay,
That's the very bottom of it.
that's the very bottom piece. These systems are also surrounded by an immense amount of hardware intended to cool this thing down to I believe it's what is it? 5 to the 16th Kelvin.
Point 4 Kelvin or something like that.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Is, and space is 7 Kelvin.
Yeah.
So it's colder than space.
Yeah, and so you have all that hardware that's necessary to perform that cooling and to mitigate the noise that causes error within these systems. The amount of power and cooling and plant that takes for the amount of compute that we're getting out of this technology today is well above what AI systems utilize today. So again, and you kind of passed by it there, but they expect basically 5 to 6 milestones in quantum computing. We are at the first milestone.
Well, we're seeing better error correction, right? So what Atom Computing and Microsoft announced 3 weeks ago, a month ago, whatever, right? So that was an increase in error correction, and this is another quantum leap in error correction. Sorry, I had to say. But that's really the challenge we've got. Like, we can build computers with many more qubits than we can use, right? The other thing that's interesting with this, I found, was the length of time that the photons would exist, so the qubits can exist, which is substantially higher, which so allows them to do something. And then they were talking about reprogramming them stuff, and I was like, my brain started leaking out of my ears at that point. So my capabilities. So
that was most interesting in this, right? Isn't this the first time that we've seen error correction improve with scale?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
And that's one of the base milestones that we had to solve with quantum computing. And that's big, and I don't want to underscore how big that announcement actually is. However, the media reporting on it has been a little overblown, especially as it relates to the test that was actually performed and passed. And they latched onto one line in the press release about the Willow chip and something that's true of Josephson junctions about the compute power coming from other dimensions. And boy, did I mean, and we talked about this last week. You have to kind of take a lot of the reporting, the tech reporting, with a grain of salt when it uses words like mind-blowing or things like that. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I found this very interesting is that this is the Google Quantum AI computing, and I'm like, I read through it, and I'm like, I don't see how this is like they're grabbing AI as a buzzword. I honestly, it's a little stretchy for me.
I agree with that. Now they're attempting to attach it to the AI bandwagon, and I think that there are rational reasons for doing that. We are, these systems that run AI tasks. If we ever figure out all the error correction, and if we ever get to milestone 5 or 6 in our journey towards quantum computing, they will be sufficiently and head and shoulders faster than anything else. But folks, we are years away from that.
So I wanted to say, though, that I don't want to lose sight. I agree. Error correction is the big breakthrough out of that. There's a lot of hype around everything else.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something else, Joel, that's really important that we don't lose track of, which is they solve a class of problems like the one that everybody's probably most familiar with is the traveling salesman problem. And they can solve that problem much more efficiently in much less more time than a classical computer could.
Yeah.
But the other technologies, like, that we've always tried to solve the traveling salesman problem with heuristics, and we've struggled with getting the best heuristics. I think with what we're doing with AI and Gen AI and these very, very large networks is building very powerful heuristics, even though we don't know how they work.
Yeah,
and
better heuristics.
Better ways. A much more efficient way is that a sufficiently good heuristic is 99.999% as good as the perfect answer and is much, much more efficient. And that's, I think, your point you were going to talk about. Maybe these quantum computers will get obsoleted before they get to that 6th milestone.
Yeah, that's the big question. And so, if AI gets really good at tasks that are related to estimation, and some of the things that estimation uses, math is used in, is like protein folding and finance calculations and drug discovery. AI might do a really good job at that for far less money. And I think that's going to be a challenge for these quantum systems. But kudos to Google. Google has actually been on a rampage lately, both in AI and in quantum.
Really,
really cool stuff coming down the pipe.
I think last thing on this one, just from editorial take for what it's worth. I think when we see the intersection of quantum and AI, that's going to be our 88 miles per hour in a DeLorean. We're going to see some serious stuff.
Oh yes, yeah.
I think that's where we're really going to see. And I've got a pocket theory that's actually what Neuralink is about. Increasingly, there's a lot of evidence that the brain is quite active in a quantum field, possibly the universal field of consciousness via microtubules in our cellular structures. Let's get all that connected and see where it goes.
It is amazing if you look.
Right, that is where people have been arguing where the free will, if there is free will, comes from. We're going to get back to Joel's philosophical bent on this.
You just said if there's free will, man, this is really getting pretty.
Oh man, it's great to be dark right before the holiday, isn't it?
There's going to be eggnog and rum. May as well have a reason.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah.
And speaking of holidays, that kind of brings us into our next one, which I'll keep real quick because we did already mention it. And that is, if you haven't seen it, the 12 days of OpenAI.
Oh, yes.
Right. So this is, if you missed it, we're well down the path, right? Day 11, but we still have one more to go. Day 10 was that 1-800-CHAT-GPT.
But should have been a 1-900 number, I'm telling you.
I don't know what that is, Joel.
Or 10-10, I'm telling you, for those of you who saw that 5 minutes worth of time when they tried to do those dialings.
I like their sweaters, but Ken's sweater's much better.
I agree.
Absolutely. What is with the strawberries? But they did some amazing. They promised to have an announcement every single day, and they've
an O1 real-time API was a really big one. The availability of search is a big one. Although I believe that Google has also announced AI Search Assist as a feature set that's going to be just standard in the Google platform as well.
For a second there, I thought this said advanced voice with video and Satan mode. Would have been an interesting mode.
Yeah.
That's an undocumented feature.
That's what alignment is Satan? I'm guessing chaotic evil,
lawful evil,
chaotic neutral,
chaotic neutral.
Everything's chaotic neutral.
And Sora, right?
Sora.
Like that's yet another one. They sort of. I mean, that's a funny one as an announcement, right? Because Sora's been around for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, this one, O1, was on day one.
Definitely. By the way, everybody should go out and read the O1 system card that was published. Really interesting information in there about how the reasoning aspect works. And it actually kind of illuminates some of the things we were talking about related to hallucination and related to kind of the alignment shifting. It's a really cool piece of work.
Yeah, my favorite part of that one was when the model was trying a capture the flag exercise. There was a service that wasn't running. It actually diagnosed, troubleshot, changed the service, restarted it, and then captured the flag all autonomously.
Wow.
In 4 milliseconds.
Well, this one, of course, was more informational. What I really wanted to bring was this guy. So if anyone's out there and has not seen from Anthropic the Model Context Protocol, I think this one will be rather important as we go forth concocting new artificial intelligence designs here, right? And if you haven't seen it, the long and the short of this one is pretty simple. This is an open release from Anthropic, right? They wanted to make sure that this was open source, that they had all the help that they could get out there. And of course, like anyone else who puts anything out open source and is a company, they are looking to make sure that this is, going to be a standard go forward is my guess. But the idea is to really easily connect your models with pre-existing things that are out there. So the initial use cases here were Claude Desktop wants access to a few different utilities, so we can easily link Claude up to Google Drive as well as Slack, GitHub, Git, Postgres, and Puppeteer, right? And that's just kind of the beginnings of things. I think we're going to start seeing some interconnectivity between models and things of that nature as we go on with this. But I just found it fascinating that we were starting to do easy connects already.
I think there's a challenge that's going to happen in this, and I never really thought this till just now, but this is actually really good. This open interconnect is very helpful, but we have very well-funded leaders in the industry. Yeah. Whereas when we have a nascent industry, you have small agile businesses that get picked up and swept up quickly. This is a case where we're got giants battling giants. And so having an open system that allows some connectivity between the different services, I think allows us, like, think about the database world, right? When we didn't have SQL and, we had Oracle and, IBM and a bunch of other companies with their proprietary databases, and they didn't really no way to talk to each other. Yeah. So you had these big people that it was in their best interest to not talk to somebody else.
I'm all in favor of anything that standardizes the RAG interface. That's big from a security perspective. It allows us to design things that are much more effective controls than the things right today, which are free-form transfers of data. So I think that's a good thing. Although MCP, really? Did we have to sneak another Tron reference in? I mean,
I get that.
Now I say that knowing full well that inside our own product at F5, we have an MCP as well. It was named exactly like that. So
we better watch out for MCPD, right? They cannot have a daemon to run that.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, well.
Maybe it's not. Hopefully theirs isn't single threaded.
Inside baseball. Cool. All right.
Well, okay. I think that is actually going to probably wrap it up for this week. Any final thoughts, folks, before we call it quits?
Oh, just happy holidays, folks.
Enjoy the later sunsets.
Well, hopefully 2025 is AI ready. So it'll be exciting to see where the world is. Look at what happened in 2024. This is crazy fast.
You ready for it to go faster?
Strap in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, guys. I appreciate it. Joel, Ken, Chuck, Pete, you guys are brave joining Byron and myself on a Friday. Now,
happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Happy holidays. I'm going to say some goodbyes here as I take you guys out, and just remind the community to click like and subscribe because we're just going to keep doing this, Byron, aren't we?
Yeah, the first one in 2025, just because of some time is going to have passed. I think it's going to be pretty action packed. I can't even predict what's going to happen. Yeah, I don't think any of us can.
It could actually, like, tons of things could happen in that. We're taking a break for 2 weeks, right? Because holidays, right? We're just not nobody's gonna want to listen to podcasts over the holidays unless you're trying real hard to get away from your in-laws, right? But that is something that we're gonna do, and then we'll come back first kind of in January. So look for us out there. And before we go, I do actually want to bring something else up real quick, because we didn't show it, but I'm going to show it anyways. If you haven't seen this yet, go look at it. There is actually a chatbot that is a multimillionaire. So go look at the look for the Wired story about the Truth Terminal that is a crypto millionaire. Not even kidding. So that has already happened. And on that happy note, happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you next year.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We'll be instantiated again next week, same time, same place, and hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.